Hello, beautiful people. Do you remember when I said I'm going to be following 4 stories in 2022 in the legal sector? I said I was going to be following ESG, Brexit, COVID, and crypto. So I am here today to give you an update on those 4 legal trends and predictions. Please do make sure that if you like this type of content that you like, comment, and subscribe. You give me a follow on my Instagram, and you also sign up to my mailing list via the link down below, because I'm going to be sending out some amazing resources there, especially just for you. Okay, so in today's video, I think my update is going to be a little bit different. I have found a couple of different law firms who are following the same areas that I'm going to be following, which is ding, 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 a really good sign, because clearly these are areas that you should be following as well if you're aspiring lawyers. So I'm going to get these law firms' articles up on screen so that I can talk through them with you.
First, let's talk about this COVID thing, right? So in my video in January, when I spoke about COVID, I talked about how it's really going to impact the way in which we work. So I thought, you know what, let's just have a look at what law firms are actually writing some think pieces about this as well. And I came across Herbert Smith Freehills. Now, first thing I want to say about Herbert Smith Freehills is that I really like the way they outline their thought leadership. I just have to throw that out there. The website is really easy to navigate. They have these things called hubs, I believe. So they've got stuff on like ESG, future of work, human rights, all that kind of stuff. So just have a look. If you're interested in this firm, do definitely have a look at the way they lay out their thought leadership, because it's actually really easy to navigate. But cool. This is what Herbert Smith Freehills seems to be saying about COVID and about the future of work generally. 3 key things. We've got digital regulation and responsibility. So that's just generally the fact that we're currently in the 4th industrial revolution. If you don't know, this is the digital age. Everything is being digitized. What's the responsibility that comes along with that? So there's different things like privacy, GDPR, all that kind of stuff. Employment terms and the return to work. So this is a really key one, because we're currently in this period, especially if you're in the UK, where like it kind of, you know, the pandemic is not over, but we seem to be on this trajectory of moving towards a new normal, quote unquote. And I say that with very big quotation marks, because I don't know how they're defining this normal, I'll be honest. But in terms of the working world, at the very least, we're looking at some kind of hybrid workspace. So a couple of days in the office, couple of days at home. What is that actually going to look like? How are we going to prioritize making sure that people are transitioning back into the workplace in a safe manner, and productivity is still kind of, you know, being kept up in the way that it needs to be, but also employees are happy, because especially in the legal industry over the past couple of years, there has been a very, very high rate of attrition. A lot of people have kind of just upped and left because there's different reasons. I personally haven't left, so I can't speak on behalf of anybody, but just from conversations that I've had, you know, I've heard some people saying things like they've realized that maybe their heart's not in it anymore. They've realized that there's other things they want to try. They've realized other things are more important, etc. So navigating this employment terms and the return to work is super, super key. And then to add on top of that, these Gen Zers, I'm saying these Gen Zers like I'm not a Gen Zer myself, but these Gen Zers, they don't play. They set their boundaries like there's no tomorrow. So I think there's a lot for such a traditional industry like the legal industry to kind of navigate with getting this right with COVID in 2022. Last thing that I think is really key, which I quite like the way they've set it out, is employee well-being. And that really ties into the whole return to work thing as well, especially after a pandemic. I think a lot of people have kind of glossed over this a lot, but like it has actually been a pandemic. It has been very traumatic, whether you have been directly or indirectly affected by anything that has happened over the past couple of years. So I think there's a lot for firms to think about, and it's something that, you know, I think good firms, to be fair, even pre-pandemic, were trying to think about employee well-being. Good businesses would try and think about employee well-being, because there is a general understanding that if your employees are happy, they will work more because they are happy to work more, right? But I think the COVID has definitely, you know, it's definitely sped up the need, I think, to maybe reflect on how certain well-being practices are done. So I think if you want to have a look at a bit more about how, you know, COVID is impacting the future of work, I would definitely say check out Herbert Smith Freehills, because like I said, I really love the way they've laid out their kind of hubs. I think it's really easy to access. In terms of how I would say you should speak about this in maybe interviews or something like that, I think it depends on the question. So don't take this as a verbatim kind of answer. But if you were to be given a question where maybe you were asked, you know, what do you think is a challenge facing the legal industry, or what do you predict as the future of the legal industry or something like that, that's where I would then say you could kind of bring up COVID as your kind of general topic. And then, especially if you're interviewing at Herbert Smith, then I would say use these 3 kind of sub points as your mini headings. But even if you're not interviewing at Herbert Smith Freehills, you can still use these sub points anyway, because I think they're really good sub points. That's why I've decided to speak about them in this video. So hopefully that helps you. Let's move on to the next thing. So Brexit, remember I said Brexit was something else that I wanted to talk about. And the Law Gazette, so for those of you who don't know, the Law Society has like a magazine called the Law Gazette. So the Law Gazette has basically said, this was in September of last year, they said that Brexit hasn't happened yet for law firms. And I think this is really, really key. And the main reason why they've said this is basically because COVID has delayed the impact that Brexit was meant to have. And do you know what? I would kind of like counteract that a little bit. I wouldn't say that COVID has delayed it, but I would say that Brexit had its own trajectory, and then COVID kind of came and now has its own trajectory as well. So it's now getting to a point where it's going to merge and the two are going to kind of come together, but it's not necessarily delayed the impact of Brexit. It's just we've now had to kind of focus on something else, if that makes sense. But we're getting back to it. So what are some of the impacts that the Law Gazette is talking about? Well, we've got things like arrangements for different offices. And this is actually a really key one, because those of you who follow me on Instagram will know that I've been doing some bite-sized interview tips and application tips where I'm looking at kind of different questions that you might be asked. And one of the questions was, if you were, let's say, managing partner or something like that, and you needed to open a new office, where would you open it? And if you were to say you were going to open a new office in a particular European country, then you having a solid understanding of how Brexit is impacting the legal sector in 2022 is going to be absolutely golden for you. So this is a great place that you could bring it into your interview, especially if you are asked that question. But even if you are not asked a specific question of where would you open an office, or in the converse, where would you close an office, if you were again asked a question of, what are some of the challenges facing the legal sector, or what's something that you think will change in the legal sector over the next 5 years, I think Brexit is definitely another really key one that you would want to bring up, because there's going to be the immediate impact in 2022 where we are seeing what potentially maybe should have happened across 2020 and 2021 but didn't happen due to COVID happening now. And then also, just for your information, every 5 years from 2025 the terms of Brexit are going to be reviewed. So we're going to see if there are any more kind of trade deals that we need to be making, if there's anything else that we need to be doing in terms of regulation and things like that. So that's a really interesting thing to keep your eye out on, and that's a great way to bring it up in interviews. Now let's move on to some of my favorites. We've got crypto and we've got ESG. So let's do crypto first. The first firm that I saw that was speaking about this was Lewis Silkin, and I really liked the way that they kind of broke it down, because they had a look at both blockchain, crypto and payments, and then they also had a look at NFTs. And if you don't know much about NFTs, don't worry, because I don't know much about NFTs either, but it's all over everywhere, so maybe we should try and get to know together, right? So the first thing we've got is what's next for blockchain, crypto and payments. Now, obviously a lot of people have kind of seen that crypto has really blossomed over the pandemic. Personally, I think it's a combination of people being at home and having more time, quote unquote, to be able to do other things. So it's obviously really kind of bloomed in that kind of way. And from a legal perspective, El Salvador accepted Bitcoin as legal tender in 2021. And that was like crazy. Like, everyone knows that the legal industry is generally very traditional, i.e. very old-fashioned, some may say. So to accept Bitcoin, something that isn't even properly regulated, if we're being all that honest, that's like, whoa, like that's legal phenomena. So what do we think we can actually see in 2022? Well, in my previous video, I kind of spoke about the fact that in finance in particular, we may see instances where things like bonds can now be kind of backed by cryptocurrencies. And that is something that we have seen on the continent, i.e. in the EU, but we haven't actually seen that in the UK yet. There are also some concerns around cryptocurrencies, which I'm sure you may be aware of. A lot of them are around regulatory concerns. So I think we will definitely see a lot more in terms of regulatory / advisory work, but we may also see a little bit more in terms of litigation as well, because as different regulatory bodies are starting to make decisions around crypto, there will be a lot more kind of law being determined by that. So that will be something interesting to watch out for. And I would definitely go and check out the article. I'm going to link all of these articles down below, but do go and check out Lewis Silkin's article so that you can find out a bit more about that as well. The other thing that I just wanted to touch on was NFTs. Now, at the time that I'm recording this video, I think about a week ago, I believe. I'll see if I can find a link to paste it down below as well so you can check it out for yourselves. But I believe about a week ago, one of the regulatory bodies in the UK, so HMRC, have seized an NFT for tax reasons. Now that is very interesting, because this is actually the first instance of a regulatory body doing something like that in the UK. So NFTs is another really big thing that I would say just keep an eye out on. Now, if you don't know much about what NFTs are, please don't feel like pressure to speak about them in interviews or anything like that. I'm always an advocate for speaking about what you feel comfortable about and speaking about what you actually know about. But I am saying that if you're someone who's interested in finance, and especially if you're at a finance powerhouse, so, if you go to White & Case or something like that, or any of the other finance firms, Latham & Watkins is another good one, it might be worth reading up on your finance knowledge and knowing something about NFTs as well. So 2022 does seem like it's going to be a really, really big year for NFTs. But it's kind of similar to crypto in the sense that it comes with a lot of controversy, and that's because of its lack of regulation at the moment. Having said that, things are moving very quickly and regulations are starting to come in, or at the very least people are starting to speak about regulation. So this is one to watch. And there are a couple of deals mentioned in this article. So again, I would say go and check out those deals because that could be quite interesting for you. Now let's have a look at some ESG. So we've got Clifford Chance. Clifford Chance has also actually, at the time of me recording this, I think maybe a month ago, announced that they're going to start screening their clients. So from what I read in the article, that basically just means that as new clients are being kind of onboarded, they're going to be checking to see if those clients comply with some of their ESG requirements, which is quite cool. It's quite a bold statement to make. So that's quite cool. But some other ESG trends that they've kind of said we should be looking out for and that we should be watching. Again, we've got that keyword regulations. That's something I've been saying throughout the video. Kind of like I mentioned before, when you're in interviews, try and think of the law in, I guess, 3 spaces, especially if you're talking about commercial law. So we've got our regulation and advisory, we've got our transaction, we've got our contentious. So here, ESG is definitely going to be impacting regulation. Again, it's because it's a very emerging kind of area of law. Yes, people be throwing around the term ESG all the time, but it's an area that hasn't actually really been legislated on that much. We don't really have many defined rules that are unified across the global economy. So it'll be really interesting to see what ESG related regulations kind of come about across 2022, what the focus will be on, whether it's going to remain on being on disclosure and reporting, and if so, what that impact will be in terms of how we would then be advising clients, or whether there'll be a different approach that different regulatory bodies might decide to take. So that's going to be interesting to look at. The other thing that I did mention in my previous video is sustainable finance. Now, there have definitely been an increase, and I can say this just from the kind of different deals that I've worked on in capital markets, but also just what I'm seeing from different firms and what they're posting. There have been a big and significant increase in the number of sustainability linked loans and bonds. That is super, super cool to work on, because different things, like for example, your risk factors are going to be slightly different when you're looking at sustainability linked bonds. And that's a really interesting thing to focus on. I think the one thing that you might want to flag in an interview, especially if you are speaking about this, is whether you personally think that this trend will continue. So whether you think ESG, especially in relation to sustainable finance, is something which, it's a here and now thing, or whether you think this is actually just going to be the future of finance. Are sophisticated investors going to move away from the traditional forms of financing, and are they going to move more towards sustainable financing? We don't know, but it'd be interesting to hear your take on that. And I think in interviews, people do definitely want to hear what it is that you think. They don't always want to hear you just spouting back what you have seen from online. They want to know that you have an opinion, that you have taken in all the material that you've read, but you've also sat down and thought to yourself, well, based off of reason and logic, this is what I think. So do have a think about doing that as well. I won't go through all of the different things, but I will definitely, like I said, link this article down below, because I think especially if you're interested in ESG, this is an amazing article to be focusing on. Final article that I did come across that I wanted to share with you is White & Case's article. So I believe it's called 5 Things You Need to Know About Trends Impacting UK Public Markets in 2022. Only thing I would say about this article here is that if you are going to a firm which doesn't focus specifically on UK public markets. Like, just bear in mind that this is basically for UK public markets. You might want to look for an article which is looking at the global market, for example, but a lot of these things are going to be quite similar anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much, but I'm just saying look out for that one. And again, we've got ESG as quite a big one here, so it's the third one down below. And again, it's just something that just continues to attract attention. So I'm not going to re-go into everything I've said about ESG, but I will, like I said, link this article down below if you are interested in reading more about it from White & Case's perspective.
Okay, so I hope that video was a little bit different, but was actually also really helpful for you. I think it's all good and well to let you know about the legal trends that you should be following, but it would also be helpful to show you where you can find some more information about these legal trends, and you don't just go to interviews and say that Steph said. So now you actually have some articles to back up your points. Hopefully this is really, really helpful for you. Please do make sure that you like, comment and subscribe. Drop a comment down below if there's anything you want me to answer, or if there's anything you want to follow up on, and I'll be back soon with another video.